Welcome to country ceremonies have become ubiquitous and commonplace, and now potentially legally protected. Now, these welcome to country ceremonies feature almost everywhere. They include football matches, they include things such as academic ceremonies, and now they also include Anzac Day dawn services. And this gives rise to the flashpoint that this video is about. At an Anzac Day dawn service in Melbourne, there was a welcome to country ceremony. Some people were clearly nonplussed by it being there. This includes people like Jacob Hersand, who Wikipedia reports is a, quote, figurehead of the National Socialist Network, who was also charged recently with making a Nazi salute. Hersand appears to be a white supremacist and a neo-Nazi. He booed the Welcome to Country ceremony at this Anzac Day dawn service.
To welcome everybody to my father's country.
It appears that thereafter he was charged with offensive behaviour and issued a summons to attend court. It appears this charge was under Section 17 of the Summary Offences Act, although it might have been under a different piece of legislation, but that's the one that appears to be the most applicable. And I'll circle back around to what that piece of legislation says in a little bit. Elsewhere on Anzac Day, an Anzac Day service that Anthony Albanese was attending was interrupted by a person shouting, "Free Palestine," to which someone told that heckler to, quote, kick a landmine, which appears to have been an appropriate response, I think. Nevertheless, neither the heckler nor the respondent have been charged, at least as far as I can tell. So it appears that booing a welcome to country is an offensive act, but shouting Free Palestine at an Anzac Day dawn service is not. But the underlying question here is whether a person should be charged for booing a welcome to country ceremony. It doesn't help in this case that the person who was doing the booing was Jacob Hersand. That's because he, being a neo-Nazi, raises issues for his defenders. If you defend him, then you'll be accused of being a neo-Nazi or a Nazi sympathizer or something similar to that. Indeed, being libertarian-leaning, I loathe Nazism because it is fundamentally racist, controlling, and socialist, and therefore anathema to almost everything I believe in. However, that doesn't necessarily think that I think he should be charged with booing a welcome to country ceremony. Indeed, it would be a libertarian stance to defend his ability to boo things while also criticizing his ideology. And as someone who often thinks about moving to Singapore, Hong Kong, or Dubai, clearly I'm not particularly in love with the ideology underlying Nazism. However, I also don't think he should be charged with booing a welcome to country ceremony. Nor do I necessarily think the person who shouted Free Palestine should be charged for what they were heckling. But of course, do let me know your thoughts about whether or not there should be a charge in the comments below. Now, a slight quirk that has arisen here is some of the media reporting seems to imply that he was booing the Anzac Day dawn service, as opposed to booing the Welcome to Country ceremony. I think those are two incredibly different things, but I'm not necessarily sure that it changes my stance on whether or not he should be charged for booing either of those two. After all, in Australia, we have an implicit constitutional protection of free speech, particularly free political speech, i.e., the government cannot legislate away or get rid of or somehow prohibit you from having political speech. In my opinion, booing a welcome to country ceremony is an inherently political act. It is saying something about whether or not those ceremonies should be so ubiquitous and whether or not the government should be supporting them. Furthermore, if you were to even boo the Anzac Day dawn service, that in my opinion is also an inherently political act, potentially a political act pertaining to whether or not you agree with war and agree with the commemoration of people who fought in those wars. We might disagree with the people who are doing that booing, and we might disagree with the ideology leading to it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is not politically protected conduct. Regardless, let's have a look at the Summary Offences Act. Now, in that Summary Offences Act, Section 17, which, like I said, I assume is the piece of legislation under which he's been charged, it says, any person who in or near a public place, or within the view or hearing of any person being or passing therein or thereon, A. sings an obscene song or ballad, B. writes or draws, exhibits or displays an indecent or obscene word, figure, or representation, C. uses profane, indecent, or obscene language or threatening, abusive, or insulting words, or D. behaves in a riotous, indecent, offensive, or insulting manner, shall be guilty of an offence. The penalty for a first offence here is 10 penalty units or imprisonment for 2 months. As far as I can tell, the cost of one penalty unit is about $200 at the moment, meaning the maximum fine for this is up to $2,000 or imprisonment for 2 months. Given that Jacob Hersand seems to have had multiple repeated types of offences of this nature, it's possible he would be hit with an even higher charge. For example, for a third or subsequent offence, one can be hit with 25 penalty units or imprisonment for 6 months. Now, I very much doubt he would be imprisoned for 6 months for booing a welcome to country ceremony, but theoretically there could be prison time for this. So I'm guessing therefore that he's been charged under section 17(1)(c), the use of profane, indecent or obscene language or threatening, abusive or insulting words. The booing here presumably being insulting words. However, while that booing is insulting, it also would be political speech. For example, one might call Anthony Albanese a liar, which would be insulting words. However, that would also be politically protected speech because it is political in nature. And it leads to the question of, can one say or do anything in relation to a welcome to country ceremony, or do we all need to sit there and give it our full attention? For example, say you were playing on your phone during a welcome to country ceremony, well, that could hypothetically be insulting. In that case, you would be doing an insulting act. In that case, would fall under section 17(1)(d), behaving in a riotous, indecent, offensive, or insulting manner. Because if booing is insulting words, then playing or fidgeting on your phone would be insulting the welcome to country ceremony. Looking at the ground, insulting the welcome to country ceremony. Turning your back or walking away or not paying full attention, insulting the welcome to country ceremony. Where does it stop? Because clearly, booing is obviously a loud and obvious way of displaying displeasure, but there are myriad other ways of doing so. Is it now the case that you need to give your full attention to a welcome to country ceremony and applaud it, lest you be charged with acting in an insulting manner? Similar with any acknowledgement of country, if you are playing on your phone or looking at the ground or not paying full attention to the acknowledgement of country, are you acting in an insulting manner, and therefore could you be charged under section 17(1)(d)? It raises a massive question. Or what about if you were to boo a politician? After all, booing a welcome to country ceremony displays a political message about whether or not you agree with those. Similarly, booing a politician. But that would be acting in an insulting manner, and therefore similarly it would fall within section 17 here. However, it is clearly political in nature. Or about the person who yelled Free Palestine. That could also be seen as insulting by distracting from the Anzac Day service. And therefore, hypothetically, if that were to occur in Victoria, well, it would presumably also fall within section 17. What about the person who shouted back, kick a landmine? Well, clearly that would be using profane, indecent or obscene language, or threatening, abusive or insulting words. What could be more abusive than telling someone to kick a landmine? Obviously, the whole situation becomes absurd. But also absurd is the ability of police and seemingly politicians via the bully pulpit to selectively charge some of these things. Now, clearly Jacob Hersand is not a sympathetic figure, but if he can be charged for this, then what about anyone else? And that's why we've got a problem here. Like I've indicated, I don't agree with Jacob Hersand's ideology. I don't agree with Nazism. I think, like I've said, it is fundamentally racist, it is controlling, and it is socialist. All things that I despise. However, if we let Jacob Hersand be charged willy-nilly, then anyone else could be charged. And before you know it, it's not just neo-Nazis that are being charged, it's everyone who doesn't agree with welcome to country ceremonies and who don't give them their full attention, thereby behaving in a potentially insulting manner. It raises not just a slippery slope, it basically tells us we're already at the end of the slippery slope, and it's just a matter of whether or not the police decide to selectively charge you in this context. Do let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Do you think people should be charged for booing a welcome to country ceremony? Do you think people should be charged for not paying full attention to a welcome to country ceremony? Or do you think perhaps some of this has gone a little bit too far? Let me know what you think in the comments below.